What's up guys? Today I'm going to be working on a brand new AI-powered text editor called Elderrune, and it's going to be sort of a cross between Obsidian and Cursor. So you'll have markdown files that you can modify and they'll render really nicely. You'll be able to link them together, but you'll also have this sort of AI-powered chat experience that you get in Cursor so that you can make requests and then approve or dismiss the proposed changes. I'm going to start building the application in Lovable, and then we're going to switch over to Cursor to make further edits and do the AI integration. My initial prompt to Lovable is create a markdown note-taking app similar to Obsidian. We should use React, Vite, TypeScript, Shadcn, and Tailwind. And the reason that I'm specifying all of the technologies is because under the hood, what Lovable does is it finds a template that it can use to start your project, which makes it a really great way to start a project, because in Cursor you would need to have Cursor write, maybe 20 different files to get the project started. But Lovable is able to pick from a list of these templates to get things started. The other reason we're starting with Lovable is because it has some really nice integrations with Stripe and Supabase for authentication. So we'll be able to get all of these systems integrated and in place before we make more feature level changes within Cursor. All right, so it looks like we got something. It did get an error, but we're at least able to use the app. All right, so this is looking pretty cool, but right now it has the markdown side by side, and I really want it to be more of an integrated sort of experience, like in Obsidian where you can just start typing things and under the hood it's using markdown, but from a user perspective, it's a rich text editor. I like to keep things real with you guys, so I'll admit that I spent like 3 hours trying to get Lovable and then Cursor to implement this using CodeMirror and then ProseMirror, which are popular libraries for this sort of thing, but they just kept having issues. And after some research, I found this library called Milkdown, which does pretty much exactly what I want. So if we take a look here, we got a really nice looking note on the left, and you can edit it just like you could inside of Obsidian. And then the markdown gets generated over here on the right. So we're going to ask Lovable to use this library and specifically this editor. Shout out to Saul Marone and Mio for creating this library and open sourcing it. I'm sure it was a ton of work. I've worked on stuff like this before and it's a lot more challenging than it looks. I'm going to go ahead and paste the relevant install instructions into Lovable because I think this actually helps it find the right versions of everything and properly integrate it into the project. So I'm saying, please use Milkdown for the markdown rendering, specifically the crepe editor, instead of the current side-by-side markdown rendering. Here are the relevant instructions and sample code. I provided that. Let's see if it can update it for us. Okay, it's written some code, and there are some errors, but it seems to actually be working. So I can, make something bold, and I can, move these around. So we definitely have Milkdown at least initially implemented, but there are some improvements. I'm just going to ask it to change some of the formatting here. So I'm asking it to make a few changes, add more padding to the left of the editor so we can see the little sidebar that we have in the crepe editor. We want to fix some of these build errors, and I linked it to some documentation that hopefully it can use. And then I said, the space between each line seems pretty high, so if we could reduce that. I'm seeing a lot of similar errors, and it's using some properties that are not documented, so it might have not actually listened to the link. I'm going to go ahead and paste the documentation from Milkdown directly into the chat here. Okay, there we go. Now we're no longer getting any of those build errors. So I would suggest if you're using Lovable, just copy paste documentation into it. I'm not sure that it's actually following the links if you paste them in. Okay, it looks like if I create a new note, it just kind of disappears. This level of troubleshooting is really best done in Cursor because you're able to quickly look at the code and see what's going on and see the changes that Cursor is proposing as you make these iterations. In Lovable, it's going to take you a little bit longer. So I'm just going to wait until I get into Cursor to handle that part of it. We at least have our project started on a nice template. And now we're going to tap into some of the other advantages of using Lovable. And we're going to get the authentication integration and the Stripe integration in place so that this can become a paid application. So I'm going to ask it to please integrate with Supabase Auth so that users can log in and see their own notes. If you're not familiar, Supabase is a popular backend service. So it has a database. It also has a bunch of authentication providers integrated with it. So it's a convenient way to add these sort of elements to your application. Okay, it's telling me to go ahead and connect Supabase. I already have an account connected, so we're going to create a new project here. All right, I'm going to create the project. All right, so it looks like our project is set up, and now I'm going to select it over here. We're going to click connect. Looks like Lovable was able to connect to Supabase, and I'm going to go ahead and ask it to create the sign-in functionality now. One cool thing I really like about Lovable is that it will actually just write all of these SQL scripts for you to integrate with Supabase and create the tables and everything, and then you can just run it right here by clicking apply changes. So it's a little bit smoother again than just going to Cursor, and it might write these commands for you, but then you have to connect to Supabase in some other way and be able to run them. So this makes it just a little bit smoother for that initial project setup. Okay, looks like we should go to the auth providers, and here we have email enabled. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Supabase has all of these integrated. We could easily add Google sign-in and all of these other applications as well. Let's see, it just got this error. I'm going to go ahead and have it automatically try to fix that before I sign up. Okay, looks like that got fixed. Now I'm going to go ahead and sign up. Okay, please check your email to verify your account. There it is. I got the email from Supabase, so I can confirm it. Although I know right now it's going to go to redirect to this local host, but we can go ahead and see if we can sign in now. All right, there we go. Okay, creating a new note. Let's see if I can create another one. Super cool. I wonder if it is saving them to Supabase yet or not. Looks like it's kind of switching me to this note. So there does seem to be an issue with the way the notes are being saved, but that's okay. We're going to save that for a little later. Okay, there's an error. Let me go ahead and just get it to try to fix that. Yeah, so it looks like this is because of that local host redirect that Supabase has out of the box, and it's asking us to use this Lovable host instead, but we're just going to save that until we switch over into using Cursor, because it'll be easier to tune this stuff when we're working on the local machine instead. We're going to do one more thing in Lovable before we switch over into Cursor, and I'm going to ask it if it can add Stripe payments. This is another integration that Lovable supports, so it should have some code out of the box that it can add to our project instead of us having to build this all from scratch. Okay, so first we'll need a Stripe account, a configured product in Stripe, necessary API keys. And then the project is already connected to Supabase. We can securely store the Stripe secret key there. Yep, that sounds good to me. Please follow the following steps. Create a Stripe account, make the product, get the Stripe key. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Now, if you've never used Stripe before, it's a really convenient way to integrate payments into your application so that you can get users that actually pay for your product. There's definitely some additional effort involved in initially setting up your account, but it's well worth it if you're intending to make money with your application. If I was starting from scratch, I would just go to Stripe and follow their instructions. But since I already have an account, I'm going to go ahead and create a new product here, and we will add it to our Lovable project. So here in Stripe, I'm going to set up my business profile later, but for now, we'll just create a product so that we can complete this integration. I'll just make it $20 per month. And there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this product ID, and we can go ahead and share that with Lovable. And then we will also get the API key as well. Lovable has a convenient way for you to add the API key here. Go ahead and submit that. And then I also copied the product ID as well as the price ID so that Lovable can use those. Okay, so looking here, it says I'll create the necessary edge functions and front-end components to handle the payment process. Now, I actually plan to use Cloudflare for my backend hosting instead of Supabase, so I'm going to ask it to make that change, or I might actually change that in Cursor, but the code should largely remain the same. All right, so if I go over here to Supabase, I see this new function got created, create checkout. Let's give it a try. If I upgrade to Pro, okay, looks like we got an error. Let me go ahead and have Lovable fix that. All right, it made a change to make sure that it's a recurring payment. Now when we click upgrade to Pro, Check it out, it's actually loading the Stripe payment page now. And when we go over to Supabase Edge functions, we can see that it is actually getting called. Okay, looks like it has another error here, but at least it's starting to open Stripe, and I think this is a great point to go ahead and switch over to Cursor so that we can troubleshoot some of these issues more easily, and then I can implement the backend that I really want that's going to connect to the AI services and things like that, and really build out the rest of the product. I could continue to iterate with Lovable, but it's just going to be a slower process, and it's going to be harder for me to see what exactly is going on in the application. So let me show you now how you can move the project out of Lovable and onto your own computer. And we do this through the GitHub integration that Lovable has. So over here, I'm going to go to Edit Code, Transfer Repository, and then I already have my account hooked up to it. So if you haven't done this, it's a simple kind of login with GitHub flow. And there it is. So now the repository is transferred into my account. And if I go here, there it is. It created it as marked on. So now I'm going to actually just check this out on my own computer, and we'll be able to open it up with Cursor. So now I can go ahead and select this. We'll clone it. And we have marked on locally now. I'm going to go over into Cursor, open folder. There is marked on, select, and here it is. So we see the Supabase functions there that it created. Here's all of the source code. You know, we have multiple pages, libraries, and as you see, this is a lot of files. So if you were starting this from scratch just in Cursor, you would have to essentially walk it through creating all of these different pieces, but we were able to take advantage of Lovable and all of the templates and integrations they have. And now we're going to use Cursor with all the flexibility that it has and the speed that it has with the Cursor agents to iterate on our code. So now that we're inside of Cursor, let's go ahead and open up one of these files, and then I'm going to open the terminal and just make sure we have all the dependencies installed so we can actually run this locally. npm I for install. Okay, and then I'm going to look at the package.json to see what the run command is. Looks like I can do npm run dev, and it will start it up locally. Let's take a look at that. All right, check it out. So it redirected us to the authentication because we need to be able to log in. So I'm going to sign in here. All right, and we're looking at my notes. Now if I upgrade to Pro, there it is. The redirect is actually working now on my computer. I think there was just some kind of environment issue inside of Lovable, but now that I'm doing it here, we can actually see that it lets us go through the subscription process. There it is. There's our first test payment. Looks like I was able to sign up using Stripe, and we obviously got a payment, but I'm still seeing this upgrade to Pro button. I'm going to save this for a little bit later because I want to show you how I can actually create the backend that I want using Cursor and then add some of the AI features that I envisioned for this application. First, I'm going to make some style changes to make sure that these lines aren't so far apart and that you can see the add button that Milkdown ships with, which allows you to add things like tables to your document. So it ended up being a lot of initial troubleshooting, and I know you guys like to see me work through those issues live, but it just didn't fit this video very well, so I'm going to save more of that stuff for my next multi-hour video where I iterate on this application. So to summarize my troubleshooting, I was able to fix the styling issue by going to the Milkdown documentation and finding the themes that they had, and I realized that Lovable had added some code to the index.css that was overriding those styles, making it difficult for them to be properly applied. And for the note saving issue, I actually narrowed it down to a problem in the Milkdown library itself that was introduced 1 week ago, and it was for a very specific edge case, and I created a bug report for them. But this is exactly the sort of issue that an AI app builder would get stuck on forever because it wouldn't know to look into that open source library's code. It's only focused on your code, and when you say that something doesn't save, it'll assume it's a problem with your code. So this is where it really helps to know how to code and how software actually works. But let's get back to Cursor, and I'll show you what you can accomplish with the Composer agents. So we have the application running locally now, and the first thing I'm going to ask Cursor to do is refactor some of these files so that I can have a more clean separation of functionality. This is going to make it easier for me to request new features because it'll be able to modify specific files instead of having everything kind of meshed in together. I'm using the Cursor Composer here and I'm using it with the agent mode, which is going to allow Cursor to create files, write code directly to my files, and then I'll have an opportunity to approve or reject that code. And then I can always roll back the changes pretty easily. So let me show you how this works. The request I made is, please refactor this file to extract the server interactions into a brand new lib server.com ts file. Right here, the first thing it does is create a checkpoint. So I can always go back to this original version before I made the request. And now it is creating a new file for me. So with Cursor Composer, it can just do that out of the box. If you are using the Cursor chat, you actually have to go and copy paste the code or click the apply button, which will then apply it to your code, and then you can review the changes. But with Cursor Composer, it just goes for it right away. Now, I actually resisted using the Composer for a really long time because every time I used it, it would delete a bunch of the code that I had in my files. But in version 44, they completely fixed that, at least from my personal experience. So now it's been my go-to way of using Cursor because it writes the changes directly to the file, so I can just flip back and see and make sure that everything is still working properly. I don't have to apply things file by file, and then I can also easily revert all of the changes at the same time by going to a previous checkpoint. All right, so it's made a bunch of changes for us, and they also added recently this toolbar, which I think was probably inspired by Windsurf, but it's super useful. So you can go through each of these changes line by line, and it's going to move to the change that it made. And then you can also move across files. So here we see this is the server.com file that it created. And then, we're going back to index.tsx where it extracted all of that data. There's also shortcuts for this. So if I hold down Alt, I can actually move between the files using H and L. And then I can use J and K to move across the different lines on that file. So it's a really convenient way to go through all of the AI changes. I'm just going to kind of take a look here. The red stuff is obviously stuff that it deleted. Green stuff is what it added. So generally things look pretty accurate to me. I'm just going to flip back over to the app and make sure things are still working as expected. Okay, yep. And then if I move away, yeah, it looks like things are still saving. It's still retrieving the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and accept all of these changes. The next thing I'm going to do is ask Cursor to start building that sort of chat interaction feature that I was talking about earlier, where we're going to have a similar chat experience to what we see in Cursor, and then it's going to apply the changes to my markdown file in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to start a new composer, and I'll describe my feature here. So my initial prompt here is that we want to add a new feature that allows me to have a conversation with an AI chatbot regarding the note that I'm currently viewing. Please create a chat component that will be located to the right of the editor. You can assume we will call a server API via server.com, so I tagged that file so it puts that integration in the right place, to get the messages from the AI. You can create them with a mock response for now. I could ask it to go ahead and build out the entire integration, but I think I'm just going to get better quality results if I break it up piece by piece. So we'll make this request. All right, so it looks like it created a new chat component for us and then also updated index.tsx to add it to the main layout. Now, when you're using Cursor Composer, you might see these big blocks of text here, and I find those to be relatively useless nowadays. So you can actually go to File, Preferences, Cursor Settings, and you can collapse the box pills here to make it just look really nice and neat like this. There are also other useful settings here, and I strongly recommend in particular that you have this one checked, because this allows Cursor to make changes, and then if it sees any errors, it will actually iterate on the code and fix those errors before it says that it's done. This comes in really handy, and sometimes it even goes multiple times fixing it kind of recursively. But let's take a look at our chat component. All right, here we go. Take a look at that. Let's see. If I type something, I send a message, and it sent me a mock response. So this is looking like a pretty good starting point. Let me go ahead and copy some random text into here so it just looks a little bit more complete. Okay. All right, so this is my note, and we have a basic AI chat interface. Now we actually want to integrate with the backend server and make sure that we're calling the AI to actually get these responses instead of just mocking them. To do that, we're going to have to actually set up our backend, because right now our application is pretty much all front end, although we do have this one Supabase function that we created for the purpose of doing the Stripe checkout. I'm actually going to create a new backend server that's going to run locally on my computer for now, and then we'll figure out where to best deploy it later. So first I'm going to just create a new folder, call it UI, and I'm going to move everything into that folder. So now we have this UI folder, and I just created this server folder where we're going to create a brand new Deno backend. Let me just cd into UI and make sure that we have all the dependencies there and that it can still run. In a separate terminal, I'm going to cd into server, and then I'll run dev, make sure that this is still working. Okay, looks like everything is still working properly. Great. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the server folder, and we're going to set up the backend. I'm going to go ahead and ask Cursor to do it. All right, I'm going to create a new composer, and we're going to ask it to set up our backend. Backends are easier to set up generally, especially if you're working with something like Node.js or Deno, because you only have a few files. It's not like a UI where you install a whole framework and there's like 20 configuration files. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it, I want to create a new backend server in the /server folder using Deno, and I want a basic API and .env for handling environmental variables. What do I need to run? Okay, looks like the Cursor agent actually looked through the folders to make sure it knew where to put things. Okay, it's creating a few files for us. All right, now it wants to run this command. I've had some issues with this. I'm not sure why. I think it's a Windows thing, but I can always just copy these commands and run them in the terminal here. Okay, I'm going to tell it that I ran that in the terminal, and then I'm going to ask, do we need some sort of Deno config file right now? In deps.ts, we have some type issues because we can't find the modules. Okay, created Deno JSON. There we go. The type errors are gone. And now we have a basic server. All right, so here's our server. Now let's go ahead and add a new endpoint that can be used by that chat interface. And I'm just tagging the relevant files here. You don't absolutely have to do that so long as you're using the agent mode, but I do find that even with the agent mode activated, it helps to point Cursor in the right direction so that it can make the changes in the right place, and so that it has all of the context that it needs right away instead of having to go and find the files on its own. So my request is, please add a new endpoint to main.ts that will be used by chat via the server comm, and move the mock AI response to the backend. All right, so I made the endpoints. I made sure I had both my server and the UI running down here in the terminal. Okay, so it made these changes. Let's go ahead and review them. This endpoint looks okay. It's just generating a response, although there's an error here. Let me go ahead and ask it to fix that. Meanwhile, I'm going to go over and look at the other changes that it made. So this is in server comm. That looks fine. Okay, and there's the other change. All of these look good. And there, it fixed the error. So I'm going to go ahead and accept all of those. I'm going to switch over to the UI, send a test message. Okay, there was an error processing your message. Interesting. Let me take a look. Okay, so I can see the problem right here. It's nowhere specifying the location of my server. So let me go ahead and ask it to fix that. Actually, that's not really what I meant. I meant change it in server comm. Okay, and in this file, I'm just going to reject those changes. I'll go over to this one. All right, we got an API base URL. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. All right, let's try this again. Still an error processing the message. Let's see, if I open up DevTools. Okay. So it looks like it's been blocked by cores. Let me go ahead and just copy paste this error and we'll have it fix that. One more time. Okay, still got an error. Looks like it's still a cores error. Oh, you know what? I think I'm not restarting the server. Let me just see if I restart the server, if that changes it. Yes, there we go. So when I restarted the server here, then it applied the changes of my code, and then this started working properly. But I actually want it to continuously restart as I make file changes. So let me figure out what the command for that is. I just asked it to update deno.json, so when I run dev and any files get changed, it's going to automatically restart the server. All right, there we go. So now we have this basic endpoint. Let's go ahead and add our AI integration now. We're going to be using Anthropic because Claude Sonnet 3.5 is the best model, and that's what I want to use to create requested changes in my notes. We'll look up Anthropic API. I'm going to go ahead and start building. All right, I'm going to go get my API keys. I'm going to create a new key. I'll go ahead and copy over the key, and this is what we're going to use to call the Anthropic API to get AI responses. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my .env file here in the server, and then I'm going to go ahead and ask it to start using this API. I'm just going to look up the Anthropic Node.js SDK so that Cursor can have some code examples to work with. I'm going to open up a new composer, and we'll say, please use the Anthropic SDK to generate legitimate AI responses for the user when they send a message. Keep the conversation history in memory for now, and send it along with each request to the AI maintains consistency. And then I'm giving it the documentation. Here's the Anthropic SDK docs. And looks like this didn't automatically format as a link, so I'm just going to press add link. All right, there we go. Looks like it's getting stuck. I'm going to cancel. I'm just going to resubmit my message. Okay, so we got some code generated here. I'm going to go ahead and replace the model here with Claude 3.5 Sonnet latest. And one thing I noticed looking through the code is that this conversation history is, using a map with a node ID. So it has a separate conversation for each node, which is good, but it's in no way associating the conversation as with the user, which is a security issue, but that would be really difficult to notice unless you were looking directly at the code like this. So it definitely helps to know what you're doing to make secure applications. And now let's just see if it's generating AI responses for us. So, hello, I'm here to help you. Okay, who are you? An AI assistant. Perfect. So we got a basic AI integration in place with just one prompt. This is a great start. Now we're going to go ahead and iterate on this, and we're going to have Claude actually generate parts of the note for us that we can then apply to the note. I'm actually going to start a new composer just so we have clean context. And my prompt is going to be, we're building a new major feature. We want the AI to generate text that is requested by the user and use a special syntax for containing the text that the user wants generated. It should be contained in this format. And I'm just doing this so that it's super easy for us to render it properly on the UI without using code blocks, which are prone to the issue of the AI generating code blocks inside of the code block. So if I use this special syntax, I should avoid these rendering issues. Whenever we encounter such blocks in the AI response, we should render them specially inside of a code block style subsection in the chat message. The subsection should have an apply button that inserts into the editor using the Meltdown insert action. So let's see if it can figure it out on the first go. So it created a checkpoint for us, so even if we don't like the code, we're always going to be able to just restore back to the current point. Okay, looks like I forgot to mention index, but the Cursor agent was actually able to find that file, and now it's going to make sure that everything is wired together properly. And what you're seeing here is the approach that I like to take, which is to build a full stack feature, and you're basically keeping all of your front end and your server code in the same repository, and then you make a request and you tag all the relevant files up and down that chain, and then it will be able to make the endpoint, integrate with the endpoint, make the UI changes, and then everything just works together. And let's just test it out and see how it works. I'm going to create a new note here. Please write about dogs. All right, so it generated something for us here. We see a little thin border and the text looks different. So let's see if it's able to, if we're able to apply that. Take a look at that. It is able to insert this now into our note. Now I wonder, if I'm down here and I click apply, okay, it'll put it down there. And then if I just kind of mess it up, if I go in the middle here and I click apply, it puts it right where my cursor is. So that's actually a super cool feature. Now I don't like that I have to scroll down, so we're going to fix that scrolling, and we're going to make sure that this is static to the right. But you can see that we're able to already insert changes, and we're going to make this automatic as well, but this is obviously the starting point. I'm going to ask it to please create a markdown table containing sample dog sales data. Boom, look at that. I just inserted that table and it looks perfectly formatted, and that's because we're using Markdown under the hood. That's the beauty of combining Milkdown with these AI generators, because they can generate proper Markdown. This is, plain text, but it can look super nice. So this is really starting to come together. So this is already looking really nice, but it's not a complete application just yet. So make sure to check out my next video, where I'm going to spend multiple hours just working through this, showing you every step of the way, how I'm troubleshooting, how I'm dealing with various issues that come up with Cursor, and hopefully that helps you build your own application. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.